She said she needed time to think. A week later, I was holding photos of her kissing another man, with the necklace I gave her for our anniversary still around her neck. I whipped my head around, staring at my wife, Melissa. "What did you just say?" I asked, not quite trusting what I thought I'd just heard. "Mike, I know this is going to upset you," she began, her voice tight, "but I'm not in a good place right now. I've been thinking, maybe we need a trial separation. I need space to clear my head and figure out what I really want." There I was, standing at the grill, flipping steaks like it was any other Sunday, and she drops that bomb on me. "My friend Jenny has a spare room," she added. "She offered to let me stay there for a while." I just stared at her. "When were you planning to mention this, Melissa? Were you gonna just leave a note on the pillow tonight?" My voice rose, sharper than I meant it to be. "Don't raise your voice, Mike. I don't want Lucas hearing this," she said quietly, glancing toward the house where our 6-year-old son was probably playing. "I knew you'd take it like this. That's why I didn't want to bring it up until later tonight." "So that's it? You've already decided? You're leaving, and I guess I'm supposed to explain it to our son after you're gone?" I shot back, bitterness practically dripping off every word. "I'll tell him myself tonight before bed," she replied calmly. "This isn't forever, Mike. I just need time." "You're moving in with Jenny?" I muttered, the anger boiling in my gut. Why am I even surprised? I could feel the heat rising, not from the grill but from every nerve in my body. "I'll draft up the legal papers tomorrow. You can sign them and I'll file it with the court by Wednesday," I said flatly. "What paperwork?" she asked, a confused frown settling on her face. "If you're leaving, I want a formal legal separation. That way, when you decide not to come back, it automatically becomes a divorce. Saves us both from doing this mess twice," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm not talking about divorce, Mike," she insisted. I just need a little time to figure things out. That's all." "Really?" I shook my head. "Melissa," I snapped, "I've been asking you to sit down and talk to me for 4 months now. But you've been too caught up with Jenny and that new little social circle of yours to make time. And now you want to shack up with your new best friend so you can do what you've probably been itching to do for half a year already." I slammed the lid of the grill shut with a bang that made her flinch. "But you're not gonna do it with my blessing. And I'm sure as hell not about to sit back and let you make a fool out of me." This was not the way she had envisioned the conversation going. She knew I'd be upset, maybe even furious, but I think she thought she could sell it as some kind of self-improvement journey for both of us. Now it had backfired. "Mike, please," was all she managed to get out before I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there alone next to the grill, forced to finish the steaks and carry them inside herself. She came looking for me, eventually finding me upstairs in our bedroom. I was in the middle of tossing every last piece of her stuff, clothes, shoes, cosmetics, you name it, into the guest room like it all meant nothing to me anymore. "Take your things and get the hell out, Melissa," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. "I don't care what you do anymore." My hands were shaking as I pointed toward the doorway. "I'll have the paperwork sent to your office. Sign it and send it back to Keith, my attorney for the past 6 years, I added coldly. "And don't worry, I'll take Lucas out for dinner so he doesn't have to watch his mom walk out on him." I grabbed my coat, still fuming, and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. Meanwhile, Melissa was already dialing Jenny's number. "Jenny, it's Melissa," she said quietly, her voice cracking. Mike didn't take it well. Not well at all. "He's talking about filing for divorce." Jenny sighed on the other end. "I told you he was going to flip, didn't I? But trust me, give it a few weeks. He'll cool down. He'll probably be begging you to come back." "I hope you're right," Melissa replied, wiping away tears. "Right now, it feels like he's ready to kick me out and have those divorce papers signed by morning." Back when Melissa and I first met, we were both working on a corporate audit, each of us representing a different bank that had money tied up in the same failing company. The job took about a week and we ended up grabbing lunch and dinner together almost every day. Somewhere between spreadsheets and late-night meetings, we clicked. Melissa was about 5 feet 6 inches, brown hair, maybe 175 pounds back then. She had a soft, pretty face, kind of radiant when she smiled, but yeah, she was a little on the heavier side. Me. I'm 5 feet 8 inches, about 195, and even at 22 I was already carrying around a bit of a belly. I guess neither of us were what you'd call gym rats, but we didn't care. We were into each other and that was enough. At least it used to be. A while after we got married, Melissa decided she wanted to lose weight. She saw a doctor, got prescribed diet pills. I wasn't exactly thrilled about it, I was worried honestly, but she was determined. She had her mind set. And to her credit, she stuck with it. 8 months later, she was down to 125 pounds and looked incredible. She went out and bought an entirely new wardrobe, and the compliments started rolling in, especially from the guys at her office. That's when things started to go sideways. I still remember the night it all came crashing down. It was Melissa's office Christmas party. She wore this dress, tight, low-cut, a lot more revealing than what she used to wear. And the guys? They noticed. They noticed a lot. It was around then she started coming home later. First it was 6:30, then 7:30, and before long she was walking through the door closer to 9 p.m. every night. By the time she got home, Lucas would already be asleep. I'd be sitting there in the living room, seething in silence. When we first got married, our physical connection was something special. We were like teenagers, couldn't keep our hands off each other. But now, once a week felt like a big deal. Oddly enough, Wednesday nights were different. Every Wednesday she came home. Let's just say she was more interested in being close than usual. That night was no exception. But it didn't feel right, not anymore. The timing, the mood, everything about it felt forced. Like she was trying to overcompensate for something else. We told Lucas that Mommy was just away for a couple of days visiting a friend, but I could see in his little face he didn't buy it. And neither did I. After Melissa stormed off, I headed downstairs and called my mom. I needed someone I could trust, and right now she was the only one who could help hold things together. "Mom," I said, trying to steady my voice, "can you watch Lucas during the day until I find someone permanent?" There was a pause before she answered, and I could already hear the sympathy in her voice. "Sweetheart, you know Melissa. She's not going to stay away for long. She'll be back by the end of the week, I'm sure of it. She can't go more than a day or two without seeing Lucas before she starts losing her mind," she said. "But yes, of course. I'll be over every morning before you leave for work." I thanked her and handed her a manila envelope I had spent all night preparing. Melissa came by a little later, and I gave it to her without saying much. She sat at the kitchen table for a good half hour, reading over every word. Inside was a legal separation agreement, though to be honest it looked a whole lot more like a divorce packet. It spelled out every detail. I would retain full but temporary custody of Lucas, while she'd still have visitation rights with reasonable notice. I wasn't trying to punish her, I just wanted structure. Protection. When she finished reading, she looked more stunned than furious. "I've only been gone 2 days, she said softly, "and you've already written off our marriage." She didn't say it like an accusation. It was more like a realization. I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say at that point. The next day Melissa called me while I was at the office. "They told me I don't have insurance anymore," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Do you really hate me that much, Mike?" I took a breath. "It's not about hate. I'm just making sure everything is clearly divided. You made the choice to leave, Melissa. I'm still covering the house, bills, and everything Lucas needs, but from here on you're going to need to handle your own expenses. That way there won't be any financial strings to argue about. You're letting this spiral way too far," she snapped. All I needed was some space. That's all. I leaned forward at my desk, speaking slowly and carefully, so she'd hear every word. "You walked out. You chose distance over working things out. Everything we're doing now, is just me adjusting to the new reality you created." She came by a few times after that to visit Lucas. She barely said 2 words to me during those visits. And even though she kept things civil, I could feel the wall between us growing taller every day. Still, I needed to know what was really going on, so, yeah, I hired someone to follow her. It wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. I needed truth, not just guesses. The reports came back. She was still going out with Jenny and her new circle of friends, only now it wasn't just Wednesday nights. It was 4 nights a week. "Looks like someone's trying to make up for lost time," I muttered as I read through the file. Meanwhile, I had to figure out something long-term for Lucas. That's when I met Beth. She was fresh out of college, struggling to find work and looking for something stable. She was 23, blonde, around 5 feet 9 inches, and carried herself with quiet confidence. Not flashy, just kind and dependable. Lucas took to her right away, and honestly, so did I. Work, oddly enough, was the one part of my life still going well. In fact, over the last 2 years things had taken off. The company had grown so much, the owners brought me in as a 15% silent partner. I asked them to keep it quiet. I didn't want the title to change how people acted around me. This way, I could hear the truth from employees, get the raw feedback on how things were really going. My latest project? A meeting with a major garment manufacturer overseas. They had factories in 5 different Asian countries. If we could land the deal, it'd be a game changer. It was strange. On one hand, my personal life was falling apart. But on the other, my career was thriving. And somehow, that made the emptiness at home feel even louder. I had met the owners of the company about a year ago at a charity event. Just one of those random cocktail parties where people half listen and nod politely. I didn't expect much from it, but we got to talking and I ended up sharing a few business ideas I'd been sitting on. Turns out they were more than just polite, they were genuinely impressed. One thing led to another, and that was the beginning of how I found myself sitting at the table with a 15% ownership stake a year later. Back home, Beth had been invited to a formal function with me, sort of a company celebration. She didn't have anything to wear for that kind of event, so she sheepishly admitted, "I didn't have anything fancy," so I looked through Melissa's old closet. I found a dress that kind of fits. She stepped out of the hallway wearing it and I had to blink twice. "Kind of fits," I said, stunned. "Beth, it fits you like it was made for you." The dress was snug and elegant but a little short. Beth was taller than Melissa and it showed. "You really think it looks okay?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. I nodded, still trying to close my jaw. "You look incredible." Just then the doorbell rang. The limo had arrived. Lucas, Beth, and I were whisked into the back seat, and just as we were pulling out of the driveway, Melissa's car turned onto the street. She slowed down, staring as we rode off, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. The only words she managed to get out were, "What the?" Inside the limo, Beth leaned over and whispered, "I always imagined accountants were boring, but tonight really changed my mind. Your job's actually pretty exciting. And people really like you." She smiled a little shyly. "I feel like part of your family, even though I'm just the nanny." That hit me harder than I expected. Be still, my heart, I thought. And curse me, but I couldn't hide how I felt. I shifted in my seat, trying to discreetly adjust myself. It had been a long time since I'd felt anything like this. Real desire. Real connection. The truth was, things between Melissa and me had been over long before she walked out. Even in those last few months, the few times we were intimate felt forced and empty. Meanwhile, Melissa and Jenny were out at one of their usual nightlife haunts. The place was packed as always. After a few drinks, most of the group called it a night, but not Melissa and Jenny. Two guys had joined them at the bar, clearly interested. Jenny was already lip-locked with one of them, while the other guy pulled Melissa onto the dance floor. As the music shifted to a slow track, Melissa let herself lean into him. He was confident. Tall. His touch was subtle but sure. It had been ages since she felt anything close to this kind of pull. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself sink into the moment, into him. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about her job or the tension at home. She was just feeling. Back in my world, things were accelerating fast. The company's partners asked me to prepare for a trip overseas. A big opportunity with a manufacturer operating in 5 different Asian countries had opened up. They wanted me on a plane by the 12th, just over a week away. "Can you be ready by then?" they asked. "Give me 2 days," I told them. "I need to tie up loose ends, set up a place to forward my stuff, and talk to a couple more people." By the next afternoon, I had everything in motion. I handed off my remaining projects to staff, signed over power of attorney to my mother in case of emergencies, and had Keith prepare the final set of papers to serve Melissa. But I wasn't telling her until I was already gone, airborne on a new path. Maybe it wasn't exactly legal to take Lucas out of state, or the country, without her signed consent. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. She walked out on us. I was just doing what I had to do to protect what was left of our lives. "I'll answer every question once we're back," I told her. That night, I sat down with my mother and laid it all out. I explained everything, what had happened with Melissa, what I planned to do next. I handed her the power of attorney paperwork and gave her clear instructions. "I know this is going to explode on Monday," I said. "She's not going to take it well. But I still want you to put the house on the market next week. Keith will be sending you a copy of the papers I'm sending Melissa." Come Monday morning, Lucas and I were gone. Bags packed, tickets in hand, and a flight to Asia waiting. It was the only path forward I saw. I didn't look back. My mom was the one who broke the news to Melissa. "What do you mean he took Lucas?" she cried. "He can't just take my son across the world." "Oh, but he can," my mom replied calmly. "Mike has full custody now. You gave that up the moment you walked out to find yourself, remember?" Melissa's voice cracked into a scream. "I'll take him to court. I'll have him arrested." Mom didn't flinch. "You can try. But you're the one who walked away. You had a solid marriage and you threw it away for, what exactly? A little excitement? A few nights out? Your friends? Most of them are divorced now too." I hope it was worth it. Melissa stood there speechless. Let me make this clear, Mom continued. There is no going back. Don't hold on to hope that Mike will change his mind. That ship sailed the day you chose yourself over your family. I hope you found whatever it was you thought you were missing. Those words cut deep. And for the first time, Melissa couldn't argue. Because she knew my mother was right. Eventually, the official letter from Keith landed in her hands and something changed. The fight went out of her. She read it in silence and finally, quietly, signed the separation into permanence. The irony? 6 months later, Melissa was back to the same 175 pounds she started with 2 years earlier. But by then she no longer had me. As for me, I was doing well. The overseas work was demanding, but I was thriving. Lucas had adjusted, and I was making sure he had the stability his mother had taken for granted. Still, I couldn't ignore some old patterns. One morning, I looked at Beth, now juggling a toddler of her own, and saw a kind of exhaustion in her that reminded me of Melissa years back. 2 days later, I surprised her. I hired you a personal trainer, I told her gently. They'll come to the house. All the equipment's included. Beth blinked. What for? No reason to let it get to that point again, I said simply. Story 2, the next chapter. Just a few weeks ago, on what started as an ordinary Thursday morning, I found myself neck-deep in the usual routine. The rush of getting our 2 kids ready for school at 7:30 a.m. had taken over the house. Chaos ruled, backpacks half-zipped, toast burning, and someone yelling about missing socks. Then the phone rang. It cut through the madness like a siren, and I instinctively grabbed it. Hello. On the other end, a hotel manager explained, very politely, that Melissa's wallet had likely been stolen. She'd apparently left it at the front desk, and no one had noticed anything suspicious until she called in a panic. My ID was in there too. And with it? About $1,200 in cash. Yeah, I had made the mistake of putting it all together while we were traveling last week. Rookie move. They're checking the dumpsters nearby, the woman said. Hopefully we find something. All I could do was sigh. Thanks. Let me know. Otherwise I'll need to grab a cab for my meeting today. Back home I turned to Beth and shrugged. Guess I'll have to cancel those credit cards. Anything else in there? She asked. Just some receipts and our hotel key cards. Nothing we can't replace, except the money. She gave me a small smile. It's just paper. Let it go. And maybe she was right. Maybe the real value is in what we choose to hold on to. I couldn't shake the feeling. Something about Melissa's recent jewelry purchase was gnawing at me. She hadn't mentioned buying anything for me. Not a word. And I hadn't heard her talk about getting jewelry for anyone else either. I mean, sure, she's got a brother, but what would he need with a $3,000 piece of jewelry? That didn't add up. So I sat down at the computer and looked up the jewelry store's website. I scrolled through until I found their contact information, jotted down the number and picked up the phone. A woman answered on the other end, polite and professional. I asked a few basic questions, nothing too specific at first, but eventually she gave me just enough to know something wasn't sitting right. We hung up, and while she sounded a little confused, I was beyond puzzled. My confusion was growing into something darker, something more unsettling. It started to become clear. The rings, they should have been in Melissa's purse when it got stolen. So why weren't they? Why was she even carrying them in her purse in the first place? If she wasn't planning on wearing her wedding rings, was she trying to appear single? To my knowledge, there were no professional reasons why someone would need to hide their marital status. It wasn't like she was in undercover sales. So why carry them around at all unless she had something to hide? Melissa had told me her purse was stolen at some event, some gala or networking mixer. She said she'd left it at the booth where she was sitting, and when she came back from the dance floor it was gone. What struck me more than the theft itself was how quickly she dismissed involving the police. She had explicitly told me she didn't want to report it. That was when the weight of it all really began to hit me. She had lied. She didn't just lie about the rings getting stolen, she had spun a whole story around it. And if she was lying about that, what else was she covering up? Then another piece of the puzzle clicked into place, one I'd been trying not to think about. Melissa had undergone surgery after the birth of our second child. It was supposed to have left her unable to get pregnant again. So if she was having affairs, and my gut told me she was, then she must have been prepared. Which meant, she had her own protection. The question was, where was she keeping it? She wouldn't leave it at our house. That would be too risky. And I doubted she kept anything like that in the car. So the most logical place? Her office. Melissa often took business trips. She'd pack everything into that oversized briefcase of hers, her laptop, reports, presentation binders. She kept it all at the office between trips. And now I had a sick feeling in my stomach thinking about what else might have been stashed in that briefcase. For all the years she'd been with the company, I always thought she was someone who stayed focused, committed. But now I was starting to think I never really knew her at all. "I think you'd be able to adapt to just about any role," I told her as we sat discussing her plans for the future. Melissa had been talking more and more about her career, about wanting to gain as much field experience as possible before transitioning into a desk job. I respected that ambition, I really did, but I couldn't help feeling the weight of her absence at home. I gently leaned in, trying to appeal to something deeper. "The kids, they really miss you when you're not here." "I miss you too," I added, hoping maybe a flicker of guilt would surface. Her expression softened. "I know," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "I miss all of you too." Wanting to dig a little deeper, I asked a few more questions. Nothing too pushy, but she didn't elaborate much. Soon after, we pulled into the garage. Melissa parked her car in her usual spot next to mine, and I noticed something odd. She looked excited. At first, I thought maybe it was because of our conversation. Maybe I had finally gotten through to her. But there was something else in her eyes, something I couldn't place. When we got inside, I was in the kitchen prepping dinner. She didn't bring her briefcase in with her, which struck me as strange. It was always with her, practically glued to her hand. I figured it was still in the trunk. As we sat down to eat, she casually asked, "Hey, would you mind grabbing my suitcase from the garage after dinner?" I smiled and nodded. "Of course," I said, masking every trace of suspicion in my voice. "Happy to." But I didn't wait. Before she could change her mind or remember something she'd left in there, I slipped out quietly, took the keys, and drove her car out of the garage. I headed to a place I trusted, the Junction Station. It was run by Jerry, an old friend from high school. I pulled up to one of the service bays and gave the horn a quick tap. Jerry stepped out, saw me, and motioned for me to drive in. Once I was inside, he shut the door behind us. "What's up, man?" he asked, giving me a puzzled look. I kept it simple. Told her I had to get a tire checked. But really, I just need a few minutes to look through something. Jerry didn't ask questions. He knew better. I opened the trunk and began sifting through her suitcase. And as I dug deeper, that sinking feeling in my chest hardened into something colder, darker. There were items in there that had no business being with her on a business trip. Condoms. A second phone I'd never seen before. Lingerie still in its packaging. My hands started to shake. I felt sick. Driving back home, my heart was racing. Panic collided with fury, and I couldn't understand how she could betray everything like this. Our marriage, our kids, me. Still, somewhere beneath the rage, I knew I had to stay focused. I needed to be smart about this if I was going to fight for custody. No emotional outbursts. I needed evidence. Proof. Strategy. She still had no idea I knew. That night, we sat quietly after dinner. The kids were in their rooms, already used to mommy's trips and long hours. They'd become numb to her absence. That's what hurt the most. She came over later and curled into bed beside me. We made love, but it felt empty. Like both of us were ghosts going through the motions. Afterward, she rolled over and asked gently, "Is your stomach still bothering you, sweetheart?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly. "But I can handle it." What I didn't say was how much I wanted her to choose us. To fight for our family. To stay. But deep down, I already knew her bags were packed, in more ways than one. Before she left, I looked Melissa in the eye and asked her a question that had been weighing on me for days. "Do you really need to go on this trip?" She hesitated for half a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it, then said something vague about work responsibilities and how this meeting could help her career. I nodded, but inside, a part of me snapped into gear. After she was gone, I grabbed the phone book and flipped straight to the private investigators listed in the yellow pages. My goal was to find an agency with nationwide reach, ideally one with a local office in the city Melissa was flying to. I called around to a few places and eventually connected with an agency that had a branch in her destination. They sounded professional, efficient. I set up an appointment for the following morning. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I needed answers, hard proof. No more guessing. No more assumptions. The next thing on my list was finding a divorce attorney. A friend of mine had once recommended someone, reliable, discreet, and known for being thorough. I found his number and made the call. Given that Melissa and I had similar incomes, the division of assets would likely be straightforward. But because I was filing for full custody of the kids, the attorney explained that Melissa could be responsible for alimony. As for her inheritance, I told him to leave it alone. I didn't want a cent of it. She could keep it. My only concern, the only thing that mattered, was the well-being of our children. I asked the lawyer to have the paperwork ready to serve Melissa first thing Monday morning. Grounds: irreconcilable differences. I also asked that she be required to vacate the house immediately upon the finalization of the divorce. The lawyer didn't hesitate. "We'll take care of everything," he said. That weekend, she came home briefly between flights. We hugged, and for a moment, just a second, I almost believed maybe she'd come back to me. As we embraced, she whispered, "I've missed you." On Monday morning, after the kids headed off to school and Melissa left for work, I got the call I'd been waiting for. It was the detective agency. "We've got something," the office manager said. "A report and several photos came in this morning from our field team in Denton. Can you come by?" 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a quiet office across from the agency rep. He placed a file folder in front of me marked with a red tab. He opened it, turned it toward me, and flipped to a photo labeled Example 1B. There she was, Melissa, wearing a sleek black cocktail dress paired with high heels. Around her neck was the silver necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. But what hit me like a punch to the chest was her left hand. No wedding rings. They weren't on her hand. Not a trace of them. The message was clear: she was presenting herself as single. The next photo, Exhibit 1D, stripped away whatever hope I might have been clinging to. It showed Melissa in a dimly lit booth at some lounge, wrapped up in a tight embrace with another man. The two of them locked in a deep, unmistakably passionate kiss. She wasn't out there for work. She was out there living a different life. I felt cold all over, even though I was boiling inside. I stood up, thanked the office manager, and took the folder. I drove straight to my attorney's office. He looked over the photos, nodded once, and said, "These are more than enough." "The papers are ready," he added. "We'll file them today." I nodded. No hesitation. I gave the go-ahead. "File it," I told my attorney. "And make sure the papers are served tomorrow, at her office. I want her to feel it." He looked at me for a second, then nodded. "We can arrange that. I just need the address." I didn't hesitate. I gave him the location of her workplace, word for word. I'll admit it, part of me wanted to embarrass her. After everything she had done, the deception, the lies, the nights away pretending like nothing was wrong, I wanted her to feel just a sliver of the humiliation I had been carrying around for months. So yes, I asked for it to be public. Later that day I got a call from her. It was short. "I'm sorry," Melissa whispered into the phone. And then, nothing. The line went dead. She didn't come home that night either. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering where she was. If she was still playing out the same charade, still pretending her choices didn't have consequences. I was angry, furious even, but in the silence I also wondered if maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe serving her at work was more about my pain than justice. The kids noticed too. They were used to her being gone, sure, but this time they could tell something was different. Lucas, in his quiet way, just asked, "Is Mom okay?" I didn't know how to answer. So instead I tried to lift their spirits. "How about dinner at McDonald's?" I offered. They smiled, and for a little while the sadness faded. That night, after they'd gone to bed, Melissa texted me. She asked if she could come by to see the kids. I told her that she could, but only under certain conditions. I wasn't going to give her unlimited access anymore. Not until I knew she was serious about being a stable presence in their lives. That's when she opened up a little. She said she'd started seeing a psychologist. That she'd been diagnosed with something called nymphomania. She said her impulses were being managed now, that the therapy was helping her stay in control. But it was too little, too late. I told her plainly, even if you're on the right track now, it's not enough. You should have taken the steps before all this. Not after everything blew up. It wasn't about being cruel, it was about accountability. About protecting my children. About not making excuses anymore.